Hello, welcome to the 7th episode of Inside the Lab. I'm the director of the Olga Tennyson Autism Research Centre at La Trobe University, and today we're going to talk about employment of people with autism spectrum disorder. And I have with me Thorkil Sonne, who is the CEO of the Specialisterne Foundation, Specialist People Foundation, and also Michael Fieldhouse, who is the initiator of a very special program at Hewlett-Packard. And I'm going to ask, first of all, Thorkil to tell us a little bit about your program, what it is that the Specialist People Foundation does around employment and autism.
Well, the Specialist People Foundation is working globally to help the corporate sector get access to the talents among people with autism. We have 11 years experience about how to establish a comfort zone in the work zone. And it's exactly when you can combine the work zone and the comfort zone that people with autism can excel extremely well in the corporate sector and fulfill many of the vacant jobs that are there, particularly in the STEM sector, science, technology, engineering, math.
And Michael, can you tell us a little bit about your role in all of this and how you came to be working with Thorkil and the Specialist People Foundation?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that came to me by chance. I mean, it was connecting the dots. I read a case study at Harvard about Specialist People Foundation and what they've been doing, and I never really dealt with autism apart from a young child that walked through my house, and he came to my house and walked straight to the back and to my pond and sat there and threw pebbles into the pond. And I, by chance, timed him, and he was actually doing it at perfect intervals. So I connected the dots, and actually then gave Thorkil a call and said Australia would be a great place to start an initiative with the Department of Human Services and with Hewlett-Packard. And that's how it all began.
Well, I mean, I guess that brings us to the next point, really, which is so few people in Australia and elsewhere with autism are employed. And in fact, 95% of Australians are employed. That's compared and contrasted with just 54% of adults with Asperger's disorder or the autism spectrum, as we now refer to it. And in fact, 86% we know of a survey done recently of people with autism, adults, have post-school qualification compared to the national average of 57%. And yet, this doesn't map on to jobs for them. And people with autism are a group with disability that are actually the least employed in the workplace. So being employed, of course, is crucial to us feeling a part of the community, that we're giving back to the community. It makes us feel better about ourselves. And yet adults with ASD have one of the lowest employment rates, not just in this country, but I think internationally. So why do you think that is the case? What is it that makes the situation such that people with autism aren't in the workplace, they aren't gainfully employed?
Well, I think we are still dragging our feet in the industrial phase where there were kind of standards. You needed standard components so you can replace, you needed standard employees you could replace. But now we are entering a knowledge-based global market economy where it's not about replacement and standards, it's about non-standards, it's about innovation, it's about new things that can come up and make a competitive advantage when everything can be copied cheaper somewhere in the world. And I think the labor market is slow in catching up on this new change of era, and people with autism are suffering from that. They don't fit into the standards that is portrayed very much in job descriptions as of today. Look at any job ad, you'll find requirement on teamwork, empathy, promoting yourself, organizing your own time, and it's really hard for people with autism to kind of make the first 5 minutes in a job interview and come to the part where they can tell about what they're good at. We need to change that around. We need the companies to focus on the talent and how to get the most out of that talent instead of sorting people out based on standards that belongs to the industry.
And the talents obviously are quite particular to people with autism, but do you think that that takes us into this sort of notion that it's jobs for Rain Men?
Well, everyone have seen the Rain Man film, but Rain Man is a Hollywood character, and the people that we employ are real people. They're all individuals, they're all different, but they share some challenges in the workspace. And I think it's the good thing about Rain Man is that it's a kind of common platform where then you can start talking about how Rain Man is not representative of people with autism. I met the character behind the Rain Man,
Kim Peek.
Kim Peek. In Ohio some years ago, his father told me that only 1/3 of Kim Peek was represented in the Dustin Hoffman character. 2/3 is Hollywood stuff. And of the Kim Peek type, there may be 15 to 20 worldwide. So if you know, or you think you know autism from Rain Man, you know 1/3 of maybe 15 people worldwide, while in the general population, there is probably 1 to 1.5% of everyone on the spectrum. So Rain Man is not kind of what you should expect from when you hire people, as HP has done recently. It's more people who have a deep, deep wish to take part, who find pride in what they do rather than who they are amongst. It's people who bring in so much joy of work, and I think Michael also can hear some experiences already from HP on how it changed the work environment, that these people who are so thankful for the opportunity to realize their potential can bring in enormously joy of work that can affect the whole department.
Can you tell us a little bit about that then, Michael?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I mean, for me, not having direct being around autism directly, and then starting to hear the stories coming especially from the parents. Being a parent myself, having 3 kids, having the previously the children would all the adults and this young adults would go straight to the home, lock themselves in the room, not interact with the family, come out of the room, and then basically have dinner, go back into the room. Now being gainfully employed, I mean, they walk into the house, have a conversation, they engage with the family, they actually building a new relationship with an ecosystem in the household. I mean, and that's just touching, and I take that for granted. And now that's, we've through the program, we've now started to see some of these benefits, which I never would have thought of. And I think that's some of the exciting things, the actual wave of impact or social impact that we'll have over the next, not just now, but over the next decades.
Yes, yes. And Thorkil, you've been doing this for quite a long time now, so I'm sure those stories are very familiar to you, and you expect them, I'm sure. Why has there been so little research capturing that so that we can use that as a base to convince people, and often governments and so on need convincing of why should we be doing this? How does it work? Anecdotes one thing, but governments, organizations want the data.
Well, I think that there has been a lot of research in autism, but it has very much been focusing on how to diagnose, early intervention, early therapy, and then trying to find a solution to autism. There's no kind of solution to autism. It's a condition. It's
That's
not
right.
an illness. And now now that there's been research going on for many years, and people are getting older, and suddenly they are finishing their education, and then they are facing a quite scaring labor market. And as the wave coming up through the education system of kids who have been diagnosed, they are really, in the US there are 50 to 100,000 people with autism turning 18 every year, leaving the education system, maybe you're going into further education, but how do we grab 50 to 100,000 people coming out of the education system, having a disorder, trying to find their way into a labor market that normally prefers order to disorder? How do we break down the barriers? Because the more being invested in education, the bigger the cliff, the deeper the fall is afterwards. And we simply do not do a good enough job in our society to waste so much talent while the industry is screaming on talented people. We simply are not good enough. And I think it's very important that we do much more on kind of the real life situation in adulthood, because you are a kid, you are an adolescence part of your time, but most of the time you are adult.
Surely.
And you have to make your way, you have to develop your life, and we need much more data on how it works. How can we break down the barriers? How can we not just prepare people with autism for the labor market, but also prepare the labor market to be qualified to receive all that talent.
So it's a lot of organizational change and thinking outside the box to create the fertile ground.
Absolutely. We have to make the industry see the talents among people with autism and similar challenges as raw diamonds. That's value. There's value here. If we only polish on one side, we'll never see the whole shining diamond. We need to work with companies who also want to polish on their side, so we can get the most shining diamond out of it and see the jobs not just as jobs, but start of a career. Because we need the professor types back in our labor markets. They've been expelled for too long.
And so where do you see then the Specialist People Foundation and the Specialisterne program, in particular the Dandelion program that you've initiated and now have across the world, in many countries across the world. Do you see that as a pre-employment program that prepares both people with autism for work and matches their unique talents to the workplace, but then also works with the employer, HP or DHS in this instance, to sort of meet the people with autism and prepare the ground for them to work together?
Yes, very much so. We need the eye-opener cases like with HP, with SAP, with other global companies who really get it and say, wow, we want to be attractive for talented people like that. That opens the eyes to the industry. And HP and SAP have phenomenal ecosystems. They have a lot of influence. So I believe that if we can continue this track and get more and more global big companies to open their eyes and actually commit, not just for us to bring people with autism into the workspace, but also to adapt the workspace and see how can we as a company benefit in our infrastructure of mainstreaming employment of non-mainstream people, because that would bring these companies into a position where they will be more attractive than other companies when the war on talent really unfolds in the very near future. But I think with the big companies, with the big brands. Afterwards, smaller and medium-sized companies will also follow and will be able to create some job opportunities in the near local environment as well, not just in centers where the big companies have a lot of people. So we need to work, as soon as we have this momentum going, we need to work with the education system, with organizations in the disability community. We need to work with vocational rehabilitation, other state supportive entities to see the same diamonds or dandelions as we do.
We have many of those diamonds at La Trobe University and universities around the world. Of course, these, as I said earlier, people with autism have talent, they come into our universities, and as Michael pointed out, they leave university and go home and into their bedrooms. Programs like yours bring them out of their bedrooms. Companies like yours are thinking outside of the box, are taking these young people, working with organizations like Specialisterne, and creating opportunities for them within, in this implementation, within the Federal Department of Human Services. So what does that mean for you and your foundation, Thorkil, the relationship between a large company like Hewlett-Packard and the Department of Human Services in Australia?
It means a lot. We have here a big company, about 400,000 people globally. That's very, very interesting. If we can get into the infrastructure all over the globe with HP, we are way down the track towards the 1 million job goal. But also to work with a partner, a client of HP, like Department of Human Services, who can see this as a great opportunity to employ people in the short term, but can also see the strategic benefits of turning people from receiving care to become taxpayers, to be independent, to contribute to the market economy and realize themselves. This is especially governmental organization like Department of Human Services. It makes a lot of sense, and the partnership I've seen so far with Department of Human Services and HP is really the strongest I've seen so far of big customer, big client, sharing totally the vision and the strategic kind of goal. For this is more than just a relationship between HP and DHS. It's something bigger.
Creating a model.
And I think it shows what's possible using the for-profit sector, the federal sector, and also the non-for-profit sector. So you get a really best of all worlds, giving a best, looking at an outcome for society.
And DHS and HP were very keen to have research undertaken on this implementation, and we were delighted that we were chosen as a partner to undertake that research. There's very little research in Australia looking at education, and in fact La Trobe is an essential partner in the Autism CRC, and there's a core program within the Autism CRC that's dedicated to adults, and particularly looking at issues around employment and how best we get good outcomes, employment outcomes for people with autism. So this research, I think, will be important. How do you see that in helping us go forward?
Well, I think it's very important that the academic community work together with the business and the non-profit sector in this, because the value is not really that there are people now working at HP for Department of Human Services. It's how did we do that, and document that for a corporate environment that has not seen it. The corporate environment is typically very data driven, So there can be anecdote, there can be good stories, but nothing is better than data and facts. And also when there's some hard facts. There's productivity, quantity, quality, competitiveness, and then there are a lot of other measure points that are, for me, just as important, where we can track the development of a career, see what does it mean for an individual to have an employer that provides a respectful environment and is able to also to come up with meaningful jobs. Meaningful jobs can shift over time, and I think as many people on the autism spectrum does not have much work experience. We need to bring them on board and then see how they unfold, because this is the start of a journey, and we don't know where it ends. But I've seen extreme talented people who, before they came to us, maybe packed bags in the grocery store. I would call that underemployment. But they need to get the foothold, and the best place you can get a foothold is at an employer like HP, who sees that this is more than a job. This is start of a career.
It's a life program, and in undertaking the research, what I'm very keen on capturing is the outcomes for the person who is employed, the person with autism, but also taking a sort of 360. What does it mean for the family supporting that person? What does it actually mean for the co-workers working alongside that person? And importantly, what does that mean for the employer? How has the employer, HP in this case, experienced that? And the value add not just to the person with autism, but to the whole organization. I think that's something that it's not easy to capture, but that's really important to capture. The essence of being with people with autism, working alongside them, what that's meant for their own work experience and for their own life. So I think it's really in undertaking research. Of course, we want to do the hard facts and look at how this has changed things, but really more sort of some esoteric outcomes that I think are really also important to be captured, to convince, I think, others that this is a path that hasn't been trodden, but one that's really well worth. And I think that just brings me to another point around you're creating a model together. We're part of that in terms of trying to track that. But how then do we capture that and incorporate it within education programs, within institutions, so that it just becomes a model, not anything special, but just part of the everyday? How do we do that? I'd like both of you to answer that. Maybe you first, Thorkil.
Well, we have tried to use a similar model in a student version for high school kids with autism in New Jersey, in the US, with fabulous success. The kids were very engaged. The teachers, they saw opportunities for the students, in the students, saw talent and motivation that they may not have been aware of. So we are working on this Specialisterne Young Innovators summer camp, and we hope that would spread in Australia as well as in the US and elsewhere, because we need to bring in the motivation, the understanding, the preparation for an active adulthood, active career for the students going through the education system. My fear is that there's not much kind of expectations in the school system for the students actually ending up in a real meaningful job. But we have to have the people now working at HP and other companies to be role models in the school system. And if the students in high schools and afterwards colleges, universities kind of use the same concept, the same model that has been used to bring people into HP, that makes sense. That is something that teachers and parents and others in the support structure can use as motivation, but also as ideas of how can I support my child, my student, and talk about a career.
So preparing the ground, preparing the field at a very starting early.
And then we have to kind of do similar things in a different version with the employers. Specialisterne is a case study at Harvard Business School. We need more case studies than one. We need it to be used at all universities, business schools, where the coming leaders will come through. We need to prepare them to see the talent, and when they end up in a leading situation, it should be natural for them also to see people with autism and similar challenges as part of the pipeline for talent for the company. But I think we're talking about autism, but really it's more than autism. We should be talking about dandelions.
Yes, yes. I'm going to go to Michael, but actually I would like to finish off with you explaining that the dandelion program. I think it's inspiring. Michael, what are your views?
I think very similar to Thorkil's views, particularly around executive education and education for our coming leaders. I mean, as the initiative was started with the Harvard Business case study for me, and reading it at Harvard, if you put those elements into education, people start thinking, what's the art of the possible? And the opportunities might not come up immediately, but they might come. You'll have that thought, that seed, or dandelion seed, just put into your head. And when it comes around, you say, well, that's something I should grab hold of. But it's actually getting that information sources, those knowledge sources into our education system, where we're not just reading through, and not to take this wrong, a typical MBA course which goes A to B, or A to Z in say organisational change. Imagine if there was a case study talking about how to get doing organisational change around diversity. And those are the things I would love to have actually read through when I'm doing my MBA, and obviously, and only that having some of the resources of of Harvard actually created the initial seed of this program.
So we open up the minds early, really, is what we need to do. We need to change our programs and change the way we're thinking about ploughing the field to prepare for people with autism, and not just that, but the dandelion seed. Would you like to end with the dandelion program and telling us a bit about that, Thorkil?
With pleasure. The dandelion is loved by kids. They blow dandelions, they have fun, they love the flower. But as you grow older, something happens. And if you buy a house with a garden and you see the flower again, probably the love has turned to hate, because now it's a weed. Now your own norms have been replaced by society's norms, and only the flowers that you have decided upon are welcome. But what makes a dandelion a herb, what makes a dandelion a weed, it's the context it's placed in. So if it's in a wanted place, it's an herb. If it's an unwanted place, it's a weed. And we all dandelions, my 3 sons, when they're ready to blow away from home, the 2 oldest, they fit into the standard model. They'll find friendly employers, they'll be seen as herbs. But my youngest son with autism, he would probably land on rocky ground. But I came up with the challenge, maybe it's not the people with autism we should change, because they have the same potential values, all of them, to unfold as an herb, but many end up seen as a weed. It is the ground we need to fertilize. We need to make the ground welcoming, so wherever our kits, our dandelion seeds end up, they would be seen as welcomed and turned into herbs, all of them. And it's not just people with autism, it's everyone. But some of those who struggle most finding friendly ground is people with autism, ADHD, OCD, schizophrenia, because the ground as we know it, the corporate sector prefers order to disorder, and when you're described with a disorder, it can be really hard. And we have to talk less about disorders and disabilities and talk about talent and the shape the talent comes in and what it takes to make a little flower bed that will unfold this seed as an herb.
Thank you, Thorkil. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Cheryl.
We have a lot of work to do. What we need to do now is to prepare the field. We need to get out our implements and start ploughing, and we need to do that in partnership. Thank you very much for joining us at Inside the Lab.